Thin Wood Walls, Chapter 4. The next day at school was worse. Now we were officially at war with Japan. Some kids didn't know how to act around me, and that was okay. At least they hadn't made up their minds. Some had. They decided I was the enemy. May came to school. Her dad was safe. So far, at least. She told me at recess. Her parents had just decided to keep her home the day before. There were some kids worried about you, I told her. I didn't tell her that one of them was me. My parents said they wanted me to hear the president's speech, she told me, but I think they were afraid to send me to school. I thought about Dad, locked away, not being able to hear the speech, and for a moment I envied May and her family. But then I pushed through that thought, back down to where it belonged. My misfortune wasn't May's doing. I heard about your father, she said. He'll be home soon? No one knows, I said. She put her hand on my arm. I felt my face grow warm. I'm sorry, Joseph, she said. I hoped no one would leave a picture on her desk. Other kids may have suddenly changed their feeling toward me, but Ray treated me the same as always. He wasn't the only white kid who did, but he was the one who counted the most. He was the one who kept the door open to what used to be. We walked home in the rain, me hurrying, him hurrying to keep up. I had spent the day thinking of Dad, and I was eager to see if there was any word of him. But when we walked into the house, I knew there had been no news. At least, nothing good. Mom was standing at the living room window gazing out. She wore a sad-eyed smile when she saw me and Ray, and she spoke too quickly before I had a chance to ask my question. What's the talk at school, boys? I shrugged. The war? And? Nobody's saying much, Ray said. Just the morons. What do they say? Mom asked Ray, but she was looking at me. She took our coats and waited. Some white kids give us looks, I said, even some who pretended to be our friends. I didn't tell her about the artwork they'd given me the day before, but part of me thought I should. I wanted her to know what it was like at school, but I wanted to shelter her from it also. They didn't talk to us unless they have to. Overnight, they changed. Or maybe everyone's just scared. Yeah, Ray said. Scared I am. Being afraid isn't a reason to turn on your neighbors, Mom said. You haven't, Raymond. It was Ray's turn to shrug. His face reddened. Have you heard anything? I asked. About Dad? She headed toward the kitchen and we followed her. Grandmother sat near the wood stove, darning socks. Thimbles on her fingers reflected light from the fire as she looked up and gave us a tired smile. Mom hung our wet coats on hangers and spaced them out on the wire that ran from the stovepipe to the wall. I tried, she said finally. I called the authorities. The police chief knows nothing. The FBI will tell me nothing. I called a lawyer. The person I spoke to said the lawyer will call me back. He hasn't. Grandmother shook her head. She looked small and, despite her dark, shining hair, older. Have they taken others? I asked Mom. Mrs. Okura's cousin in Seattle. More here in the valley, according to rumor. No one knows where? No. What are the other families doing? I said. I do not yet know what all the other families are, or who they are, Mom said, but I will find out somehow. I will ask if they have any information that would help us. She went to the counter and poured milk from a shiny glass bottle into a pan. This may take time, Joseph. Time? How slowly was time passing for Dad? How much time did he have? There must be something we can do, I said. Government, Grandmother said. The government is in charge now, Joseph. The government moves at its own pace. Your mother will do what she can, and I will help her. So will Michael. You can do your part by practicing patience. And by staying out of it, as usual, I thought. Listen to the truth in your grandmother's words, Joseph, Mom said, and I decided to keep my mouth shut, at least for now. I would try to keep grandmother's words in mind. Mom put the pan on the stove. She got sugar and chocolate from the cupboard. I watched Ray's eyes light up. Ray thought Mom made the best cocoa in the world. He called his mom to tell her where he was. We drank cocoa from big cups mounded with marshmallows. Mom and Grandmother drank tea with milk and sugar. The kitchen was quiet, except for the gentle sounds of sipping. Ray and I went to the living room and turned on the radio. An Ovaltine commercial came on, and I knew I was tuned to the right station. It was time for one of my favorite radio programs. A gong signaled midnight. sending a little chill up my spine. Then came the sound of a powerful airplane, far off, closer, closer, finally screaming into a dive. I felt my heart speed up. Captain Midnight was on the air. Ray and I listened while Captain Midnight and his secret squadron tried to outwit the bad guys. Ivan Shark and his daughter Fury, but he got into deeper and deeper trouble. Then another Ovaltine commercial came on. "Not as good as your mom's," Ray said. He was right, but Mom's hot chocolate didn't come with the secret squadron decoder. The commercial ended. The program returned. Normally, it would have had all my attention. I was a Captain Midnight fan, and I was also a writer. I hoped to someday write a Captain Midnight story good enough to be on the radio. But today, I couldn't concentrate on the program, especially a minute later when it was interrupted with news of airplanes being spotted off our coast. I stared out the window, watching for planes, for Dad, for Mike. The rain stopped, the sun, sinking, fanned rays of light through the overcast. Once more, I pictured Japanese bombers, shooting out of the clouds like lightning bolts, diving down into our valley. I felt knotted up inside. I glanced at Ray, who was chewing his lip, twisting his long fingers together. I heard his knuckles crack. The news bulletin had ended, but Captain Midnight had never done this to him before. Suddenly I heard the noise of a plane, loud and getting louder. I jumped to my feet. Ray jumped to his. Then I realized it was the radio. Captain Midnight was after the bad guys, thundering after them in his eagle-winged racer. I relaxed. Ray smiled a sheepish smile. We cheered, pretending to ourselves that our Captain Midnight cheer, which we yelled out at least once during every episode, was what had gotten us up with our hearts pumping. I sat back down, half listening to the radio. Outside, Mrs. Jacobs walked by with her little girl, Emily. A week earlier, they would have looked for me in the window and waved. Now their eyes were down, as if there were alligators in the grass. The Richardson girls skipped past, not looking left or right. Then Bobby Hatch and his cousin Mickey, guys I'd play basketball with, paraded by like royalty, noses in the air. Captain Midnight ended. Ray had to leave. Mike came home in a better mood. He let me practice some judo holds on him, then tried a few on me. He went to the kitchen for grown-up talks with Mom and Grandmother, leaving me flat on my back, but wanting more. When I tired of hearing their murmuring, when I decided I wouldn't move closer to listen, I went to my room. I flopped on my bed and stared at the spidery cracks in the ceiling. I imagined myself back downstairs. I'm at the table with Mom and Mike and Grandmother. They're all looking at me, waiting for me to answer questions about the war and how it's going to affect us. I give them brilliant opinions, and they hang on every word. I stand up and pace around the room, gesturing and making keen observations and predictions. And they sit there in silence, sorry they hadn't included me in their discussions before. I got up and put my ear to the cool wood of the floor to see if I could hear anything, but their voices were too soft, too far off, and no one called out for me to join them. I picked up my journal and moved my chair to the window and sat, looking out at the darkness creeping up on my town. I wrote about what I'd seen, about Dad. I added a poem. Outside the window, strangers, once friends, scurry past. Moles in black tunnels. Mike came up and sat on his bed. Writing? I nodded. He stretched out with his hands behind his head. A story? Journal stuff, I said. You want yours? It was at the foot of his bed, sitting on a handsome chest of drawers he'd made. As far as I knew, the journal had been there since he'd gotten it, only 2 nights before. Why did it seem like 2 years? We're eating in 5 minutes, he said. We ate, mostly in silence. I missed Dad's presence at the dinner table, the sounds of him being there, even though it meant him constantly questioning us, and Mike and I having to answer, to recount our school days and the progress of our studies. I figured Mom, Mike, and Grandmother had already talked about everything important. Now it was the weather and Mrs. Kimura's new baby. I wanted to hear about the war, what it would mean to us. What about Germany? I said finally. You have enough to worry about, Joseph, Mom said. Germany is a continent and an ocean away. Japan's ally, Mike said. Vermin. Grandmother said it the same way she said government. She'd learned the word vermin, not government, from a bottle of rat poison. German vermin. Japan is our enemy, Mom said. I am afraid Germany will also be. Nazis, Mike said. The bullies won't bully us. They'll wish they hadn't picked this fight. We'll fight them then, I said. I pictured the war going on, and me marching off to fight in it. I wondered how I would even get to the war. Or would it come to us? To our valley? With everything we've got, Mike said. Vermin, Grandmother repeated louder as if we'd been asleep the last time. Yes, Grandmother, Mike said. Rats. Carriers of disease. Grandmother nodded. It's what people are saying about Japan, Mom said. About Japanese. We're Americans, Mike said. Nevertheless, Mom said. Japan deserves whatever it gets, Mike said. We don't. Being in on the adult conversation wasn't what I'd pictured. They'd talked about the bad things, scary things, but no one could tell me what was going to happen. No one asked for my opinions. I knew Mom didn't think I should be included. I went back upstairs. I didn't pick up my journal. What would I write? My fears? Mike wasn't afraid. I could see it on his face. That scared me too. To lose is to win, Mom had said. But did Mike hear? I looked out my window, down into the darkness of our front yard, and imagined Hitler, with his silly Charlie Chaplin mustache, his shiny boots, goose-stepping up our walk. I imagined Mike going out to challenge him, barehanded, smiling at his prospects. I closed my eyes, but the image wouldn't go away.